Today, we're talking about a surgeon who operates on a scale that is, well, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. This is a story about a true pioneer, someone who didn't just push a field of medicine forward, he literally created entirely new ones. His name is Professor Isao Kashima, and his career is nothing short of a revolution. But let's just start with a question that gets right to the heart of his work. How in the world do you repair something that you can't even see with your own eyes? And no, that's not a riddle. It was the very real, daily challenge that Professor Koshima decided he was going to solve. To get the answer, we have to talk about the absolute cutting edge of surgery, nanomicrosurgery. Basically, it's the art of anastomosis, which is just the surgical term for connecting things, but on blood vessels or lymphatic channels that are almost unbelievably tiny. So just how small are we talking about here? We're talking less than 0.3 millimeters. To put that in perspective, a single strand of human hair is about 0.1 millimeters thick. So we're talking about stitching together tubes that are maybe 2 or 3 hairs wide. It's mind-boggling. And Professor Koshima, he didn't just master this, he pretty much invented it. But to really get how he got down to the nanoscale, we actually have to rewind a bit. We've got to go back to an earlier revolution he started, one that completely changed the game in reconstructive surgery. It's called the perforator flap revolution. All right, so here's the problem surgeons used to have. If you needed to reconstruct a large wound, you'd take a flap of tissue from somewhere else on the body. But to keep that tissue alive, you had to bring its blood supply with it. And that often meant taking a whole chunk of healthy muscle, causing major damage where the tissue was taken from. Koshima's idea was just genius. He thought, why take the entire muscle when all you really need are those tiny little blood vessels, the perforators, that run through it? So he figured out a way to carefully isolate just those vessels, leaving the muscle completely intact. It was a game changer for patients. And once he had that breakthrough, the floodgates just opened. I mean, look at this timeline. For about a decade there, from 83 to 93, Koshima was on an absolute tear. He wasn't just tweaking one idea, he was inventing brand new procedures, one after another, each one building on the last. It's incredible. And this wasn't just theory. It had a huge, immediate impact on people's lives. The deep flap he introduced in 1989, it's now the gold standard for breast reconstruction all over the world. The gap and ALT flaps gave surgeons amazing new options for other really tough reconstructions. He was solving problems that had stumped the medical world for years. But for Koshima, sparing muscle wasn't the final frontier, not even close. He then turned his focus to an even more delicate, almost microscopic challenge. And this is where he basically creates the field he famously named super microsurgery. The big problem he wanted to solve was lymphedema. It's this really awful condition where your lymphatic system gets blocked, fluid builds up, and you get this chronic, painful swelling, usually in your arms or legs. For the longest time, there just wasn't a good surgical cure. Now, Koshima didn't just invent a procedure. First, he had to become a detective. He figured out what was actually going on at a cellular level. He discovered that the tiny muscles inside the lymphatic channels were breaking down. This made the vessels get stiff and thick, fibrotic, basically causing a permanent traffic jam for all that lymphatic fluid. And his key insight? You had to get in there early and build a bypass. But performing that bypass, that required a level of precision that just didn't exist yet. So he created it. Kashima himself coined the name for it, super microsurgery. This is the art of connecting vessels that are between 0.3 and 0.8 millimeters thick. We are now officially operating in the realm of the nearly invisible. The solution he came up with is just so elegant. It's called a lymphovenous anastomosis. You find that tiny blocked lymphatic channel, you find a healthy little vein nearby, and then you stitch them together. That's it. The lymphatic fluid now has a new exit ramp, draining into the vein and bypassing the blockage. Of course, stitching them together is a bit of an understatement. He had to invent whole new techniques, like his famous one-hand suture method, just to make it physically possible on something so small. You know, it's easy to get lost in all the technical brilliance here, but Koshima's legacy is about so much more than just his surgical techniques. It's about the incredible human impact he's had as a surgeon, but also as a teacher and a mentor to a whole generation of surgeons all around the world. I mean, just look at these numbers. They are absolutely staggering. He personally performed over 3,000 of these complex tissue transfers. He published over 200 original papers, and that's just in English.
And he traveled to more than 20 countries to perform live surgeries, showing people his techniques firsthand.
And that teaching had a direct, real-world impact. Listen to Professor Igor Reshetov from Russia. He says that Koshima personally brought new technologies to their country, technologies they immediately started using to help their own patients. His work spread like wildfire.
But what's so cool is that his influence wasn't just about his skill. The people who learned from him talk about a man who was as charismatic as he was brilliant. Dr. Yelena Akalina from Columbia University remembers him not just as a surgeon, but as an elegant samurai, a great storyteller, even an amusing dancer. He was the whole package. And this next story just leaves you speechless. Professor Vladimir Banger from Tomsk talks about watching Koshima operate on an 8-month-old baby. He was using a suture thread that was only 30 microsons thick. That's less than half the width of a human hair. And this is the director of a microsurgery institute saying he'd never seen anything like it in his life. Just wow.
And here's the kicker. He's not done. You'd think after a career like that, you'd earned a rest, right? Nope. Even in his 70s, Professor Koshima is still pushing. He's now working to develop and use an even finer suture, the 14-0, to operate on an even smaller scale. That drive to innovate just never stops.
And all of this really leaves us with one final big thought. Professor Koshima has shown us time and again that what seems impossible today can become the standard of care tomorrow. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What new cures, what new possibilities are waiting for us when we can finally operate on a scale that, right now, we can't even begin to imagine?